Okay, this is really a bit of a test hangout that I'm broadcasting, hopefully put on YouTube and get some screen flicker, and I'm not sure if my mic's that good, so we'll see how it goes. So anyway, yeah, stop saying I'm sharing my screen, and basically I just want to present a couple of arguments about atheism and against atheism essentially. So to begin with, I'm going to define what I mean by an atheist and atheism. An atheist is somebody who believes that God does not exist. It's a positive statement about what they believe to be a fact of reality, i.e. that God is not part of reality or existing in any kind of supernatural way with respect to reality. And atheism is this belief, essentially, and an atheist is somebody that holds to that belief. This screen that I've got up here, I hope that's broadcasting properly, is from the Cambridge Online Dictionary, as hopefully you can see in the address bar. Now, here is a philosophical dictionary, Stanford Philosophical Dictionary that they've got online here. And this concurs with the Cambridge Online Dictionary, saying atheism means the negation of theism, the denial of the existence of God. So they deny that God exists. Again, this is the normal usage. If somebody tells you that they're an atheist, you will generally jump to the impression that they believe that God does not exist, or any kind of a God exists. An agnostic, now, this is somebody who doesn't know, so they don't know if God exists or doesn't exist. They might think that it's impossible to know. They might not care. They might be ignorant of the arguments. They might have heard the arguments and just end up with this kind of not knowing. They're not convinced either way. And generally, when people say they're an agnostic, this is a kind of this is what they're trying to get across. So many atheists today use a different definition. They claim, and you can look up, there are dictionaries online and in print that claim that atheism now means somebody who merely lacks belief in God. Now, that would then include both agnosticism and atheism. So an agnostic, they lack belief in God. They don't positively believe that God exists. An atheist who believes that God positively doesn't exist also doesn't believe that God exists. So this new definition becomes like an umbrella term, which is just saying that they don't positively believe that God exists. I disagree with that usage because it's non-standard. It was first proposed that the definition should be shifted to this umbrella definition to include a traditional atheism and traditional agnosticism, as this sort of it should be shifted in this way by, I think it was Anthony Flew, a paper or book, Presumption of Atheism. And he admitted at the time it was a non-standard usage, and it would be easier to debate with, to support. It's just a psychological position, isn't it? That you don't positively believe something. You don't need to give a reason why you lack belief in something, unless you hold to, it's a certain kind of agnosticism which says that you don't know, and it's up to somebody to convince you. So this is it's basically a deceptive definition, a deceptive move in which they say, on the one hand, that they've got nothing to prove because they don't believe that God doesn't exist, and on the other hand, that they've got nothing to say because they are, informationally indifferent to the proposition. So yeah, I believe it's a troll. It's deceptive. It's what a troll would do. If somebody says to you, if you ask somebody if it was raining outside, and they said to you, "I don't believe that it is raining," and then you find out that it actually is raining, then if you ask them, well, I thought you said it wasn't raining, they could deny that. They could say, well, no, technically I didn't say that. I just said that I didn't believe it was raining. We jump to this, it's a kind of implicature that we use in language all the time. We say one thing to imply many other things, and we understand that the general usage and meaning and context in which we're saying them, that the people are going to understand this, the implications or the implicatures of our statements to expand and extract this other information. So if you say to somebody, do you want to play tennis? And they say it's raining. They haven't told you that they want to play tennis, or they don't. But I suppose we would generally assume that most people would not prefer to play tennis if it was raining. So if they just give you the answer that it is raining, you assume that that's because they don't want to play tennis. That's a sufficient statement to make to get across that information. If you then see them another day and they say, well, where were you? I was waiting to play tennis in the rain. And you could say to them, well, I thought that's why you said it was raining. And they could say, well, technically I didn't say I don't want to play tennis. It's a deceptive move that is tradition. Well, in modern times we call that trolling somebody. Essentially, you lead them to believe something. You clearly lead them to believe one thing because that's the standard way in which we communicate, and then you deny it because you didn't explicitly say it. Now, so I asked a bunch of atheists in an atheist community. Who is in an atheism community. There's a lot of about 3,000 people, atheists in that community. I only got 114 votes on this. As you can see, somebody's. Let's have a look. I think it's a couple of people. A couple of people believes that that they can believe that God exists whilst being an atheist. So obviously there's a couple of confused people there. The question is, what do atheists believe? If I'm asking them, I'm asking atheists if they believe that God exists, God does not exist, or they've got no belief either way. Now, this is a community of people which will explicitly state that atheism means that they've got no belief either way. So, well, it's fair enough that there should then be a sort of a 50-50 split, because it's an umbrella term that includes both of these propositions according to them. But even so, as you can see, there's 53% of respondents that actually believe that they positively believe that God doesn't exist. So, which is strange, because when you debate these people, they take this position, no belief either way. They will not put any argument forward to suggest that God does not exist. They sit there with this deceptive move and saying, well, technically atheism is no belief. It's just lacking a belief. So it's our job to convince them that God does exist. Even though they clearly do, for the majority of them, believe that God does not exist, and I have got a strong belief, a strong inclination that almost none of the people that have selected no belief either way actually have no belief either way. If you look at their communities, they act and speak as if they believe that God does not exist, but they realise what's going on, so they don't want to show their inconsistency. So they're pretending that they don't have a belief, when in actual fact, I strongly believe that they do actually believe that. Now, that's just my opinion from my interaction with atheists. Now let's go back to the troll move that they make. So if you tell people, so I've asked in another community. I haven't had very many respondents back from this, but I would assume that this would be stronger. But if somebody tells you that they're an atheist, and this is in a thinkers community, it's got many thousands of people in there. But there's a lot of posts, so a lot of posts go sort of unnoticed. So, I've asked them, if somebody told you that they were an atheist, what would you think about what they believed about God existing? Would you think that that means that they believe that God does exist, God doesn't exist, or that they have no belief either way? Now, as you can see, more people believe that more people believe that an atheist would be telling you that God does exist than that having no belief either way. Obviously, that's a confusion, yeah. But as you can see, the confusion of people believing that saying God exists is greater than those who think that an atheist believes that they've got no belief either way. And the vast majority of people here are saying, I know there's only 16 votes, so there's not much to go by. But I believe that if this is universally the case, and it is the proper philosophical definition. It's the traditional definition, and it's the common definition and usage today. Okay. I think there's not much of a support for it, but you can ask people, you can do your own thing, you can look into that yourself. So I do feel quite strongly that it's the case that if you tell somebody who isn't involved, they don't really understand these deceptive moves that atheists make, that you're an atheist, they're going to believe that you believe that God does not exist. So if you don't want to deceive them, you shouldn't tell them that you're an atheist unless you actually believe that God does not exist. Okay, you need to tell them, you need to specify. You can say to them, yeah, I'm an atheist, but I don't believe God exists, or I don't believe he doesn't exist. I don't know. I don't know either way. I don't have any belief either way. You have to specify that to them, because most people are going to be deceived into thinking that you believe God does not exist. Now, if you actually believe that God does not exist and you tell them that you're an atheist, knowing that that is going to be their assumption, then you need to tell your other atheist friends to stop trolling people. Okay. So the reason why they've done this, and the reason why so many dictionaries have changed their definition of atheism into this umbrella term, is because they think it's quite clear that you don't need a term, a separate term for people that believe that God does not exist. Clearly you do. There's a lot of people that believe that. But the reason why they don't want them to have their own term is because they believe that that is entirely irrational. It's been shown that to believe that God does not exist is not rationally supportable. You can't support that from a rational point of view. By that I mean that you can't provide a logical justification or inductive evidential support to support that belief. You've got to take it completely blindly as a matter of faith. So in that way, atheism is necessarily purely blind, and the realization of this is the reason why of the redefinition. But most atheists, or I would say pretty much all atheists, anyone using the term atheist, is well aware of all this, and they use it in a deceptive way. They know that they don't believe that God exists. They know that they've got no justification for that whatsoever. So they troll people. They deceive people, essentially. They tell them that they're atheists. They act like atheists. They mock believers in God, and then when you ask them to support their justification for God not existing, they fall back to this presumption. They then all of a sudden claim that they've got no belief either way. If they've got no belief either way, what are they blaspheming for? What are they insulting believers for? They must, it's inconsistent. Anyway, so I in this community of Atheism community, I did actually, after doing that, I did present the debate. Then I did ask I did debate both points, which is, as you can see, they've got a few comments. Let me get these out. I should have done this before, actually. And now that's happened, which is annoying. Okay, so Yeah, so I've asked people to support why I believe that God does not exist as the only rational position. And they couldn't. There was no support. The only argument that we got was this absence of evidence. They claim that there's no evidence for God, and therefore they're justified to believe that God doesn't exist. Clearly, this is nonsense. The other position, I asked them why ignorance in God existing or not is the only rational position. There is exactly the same absence of evidence claim. Again, totally nonsense. We've got no arguments against God, lots for God. They deny these arguments for God, but that's still. But we haven't got an equal weight of arguments to deny against God. So we still have this only rational position being actually theism, belief that God does exist, or some kind of supernatural reality, some kind of foundational personal system, some kind of moral authority, well, I mean, a lot of them will ask what the specific definition is of God, and I will copy and paste the Google definition, which is personal creator and ruler of the universe and moral authority. So yeah, they tend to not like that definition for some reason. They don't seem to have any arguments against that conception of God, and they like straw man in it with spaghetti monsters and stuff. But that's beside the point of the issue. Nobody believes in a spaghetti monster. Okay, so anyway, for this anyway, whatever the arguments are about how atheism should be defined, there's obviously either God exists or God doesn't exist. It's a true dichotomy, either God or not God. People then they believe things, so they can believe that God exists, they can believe that God doesn't exist, or they can have no belief. They might not have even heard of the concept of God. So there's a true trichotomy of belief, but this is only belief, and so let's have a look at. So taking atheism as a term that means you believe that God does not exist. Agnosticism is a term that just means you're not sure if God exists or not. Theism is a term which means you believe that God exists. There's lots of different types of atheism and theism, and lots of different complexities and grey areas and overlap between various conceptions. So this is a very basic division. It's useful for exploring the subject. Okay, I've explained that. That basically not taking that definition is basically just trolling people. You're just deceiving them, and you shouldn't do it. It's an immoral point of view. Atheism does have a lot of immorality, it seems, but that's one point which it becomes quite clear if you try and engage with atheists. Okay. So first of all, I did say that atheism has been pretty much shown to be unsupportable. Yeah, I mean, you can ask. This argument's basically just asserting that we know a belief without reason or evidence is irrational. It's just a belief held for no reason, a blind belief. You're taking it with or on blind faith. So the belief of atheism is a proposition that God does not exist, and that there's no evidence. There's no evidence that is true. And I've not found an atheist yet that provides any. Now, there is the logical problem of evil, which is considered, which is not really used anymore. We can't really know if that's actually evidence against God, unless we had sort of God's perspective. And that would only be obviously for a particular concept of God, which is generally the general conception, which is a God which is all good, you know. So yeah, so it's very difficult to get any atheist to provide any evidence or reason that atheism is true, and therefore it's irrational. They hold it irrationally, blindly, and you know, you shouldn't hold irrational beliefs. You know, if you want to be, I think it's a kind of an ought. Well, it is an ought that we ought to want to be and aim towards being rational, to believe in things which make sense, logically coherent, and which are in line with reality. Now, atheism is none of them, so you shouldn't believe it. You shouldn't believe it. So yeah, so I posted this in a few communities a while back, and you know, mostly people just reverted on this presumption of atheism, saying that atheism isn't this positive belief, even though if you go into a room of thousands of atheists, they will actually, most of them believe that God does not exist. So you know, okay, that's not that interesting, that argument. This argument. So I started to notice that you know, there is this level of irrationality and blind faith in atheism. There's a lot of deception, a lot of equivocation, a lot of immoral trolling, basically, a lot of straw manning, and you know, it would be different if it was a honest misconception or a fairly accurate portrayal, a simplified portrayal of what it is you believe in, and maybe some of them do believe that, but you know, I think that we've explained, and we do explain these things. I've certainly explained these things a number of times to a lot of the same atheists posted these descriptions in atheism communities, and they continually use these sort of horrible, grotesque caricatures of you know, of God. And you know, it's not just a lack of understanding and ignorance. I don't think you can put it all down to that, although there's obviously a lot of this ignorance and lack of understanding. I think a lot of it is immorality, essentially. They're not interested in the truth, and they just find that an easy caricature to make and to laugh at and to try and annoy people and to play on their respect for God, to try and, you know, strong arm them out of the debate, so that they can claim some kind of cheap win. Anyway, so this, upon noticing these types of things, I started to construct arguments which, I mean, which basically says that there's something going on here. This is not, you know, for any other proposition in any other debate. What we find is that people try and be reasonable. Essentially, most people engage in cooperative conversation, and they have there's arguments on both sides. Normally, if there's a debate going on, there's generally arguments on both sides of the debate, and people are trying to be reasonable and trying to put forward reasonable arguments. But I don't seem to find that this is the case with atheism. It seems to be a bit of an anomaly in the whole debate scene. Now, there's lots of possible explanations for this, but I think one explanation is that well, as this argument describes, is that atheism is actually false, and we do have various we have a lot of subconscious activity going on in our minds, and the belief that atheism is true contradicts with things, and we might not know exactly where the contradictions lie, or we might not bring them to the surface of our subconscious, into our consciousness, into our conscious awareness. However, there are these multiple contradictions, and it begins to unwind the rationality and the reasonableness of somebody that holds to a belief system or a singular belief, which conflicts with so much of their other presumptions, preconceptions, and general prior beliefs. So I believe that is what's actually happening, and essentially it's atheism. Atheists themselves have a proof of God in their subconscious somewhere, multiple proofs even, and this is what's sort of unraveling them, and their inconsistency, their crazy actions, illogical argumentation is all the result of this contradiction. So this argument basically says that there's it posits a hypothetical agent, as in a hypothetical person or thinking being, and let's say that the thinking being is rational and holds that God does not exist. So he believes that God doesn't exist. This is a hypothetical thinking atheist. Now, if atheism is true, then it's possible that Agent 1 exists, this hypothetical agent. He's rationally deduced that that God doesn't exist. And let's also say that this agent has got access to the kind of information that normal humans today do. He can get on the internet, he can go to the libraries, he can get on YouTube, he's got access to all the information we've got, and from that he's got he's rationally constructed enough reasons to properly believe in a logical and rational manner that God does not exist. This harks a little bit to science. Okay, so science basically looks for logical systems which relate different facts to other facts that they can't just directly observe. So Agent 1 is essentially has this kind of scientific mindset, and he upholds a scientific mindset very rigorously. So it goes without saying then that if atheism is a true position, if atheism is true, then it should be possible to hold the position rationally. If atheism is true, Agent 1 is at least possible. Well, I don't know if it's possible today, or if it's actually possible today, but it would seem to be the case that if atheism is true, then at least it is conceivably possible. To argue against that is to basically say that science there's not enough information in reality at the moment. Science hasn't derived enough about the world to come to a logical understanding such that you can deny God. So, maybe that is the case, but a lot of atheists will argue that they base their beliefs on science. So I think a lot of atheists would actually agree with that if atheism is true, then it's possible to be a rational atheist, essentially. Now, if Agent 1's possible, then atheist thinking should be at least as rational or irrational as the contrary position, i.e. theism, or any other position, essentially, but the more we think about the proposition of atheism, the more we seem to be led into all these absurdities and which deny other things that we want to hold to be true. And I think this is why atheists tend to use very little arguments, and the majority of them do actually engage in meme generation. I think it's much more probable that premise 2 is actually true. This is that it's not actually possible to be a rational atheist today. It's not possible to be a thinking person that has rationally come to the belief that God doesn't exist. And therefore, taken together then, atheism is false. It's false that God does not exist. Now, this is not so much a proof. So I was getting this argument confused with another argument, actually, which is which this came from. This is a later development of a previous argument I developed, which basically says about the subconscious coming up with a proof by contradiction that atheism is false. But anyway, this is in the general spirit of that series of arguments. And the next one I'll show is like the current one, which is probably not as strong, but there we go. Anyway, so when this argument concludes that atheism is false, it's not saying that it's we've proven that God exists in reality. What it's saying is this is whenever you see an argument that proves something, you got to look at the premises, and this is the information that it's using to prove it. So if you look back to the premises, this is what it's actually proving. This is the content. So what's actually being proved here is that atheism is false if it is that atheism is true, then agent one is possible. But this would only be true if there was enough scientific information about the proposition. So you could just deny that there's a science that atheism is scientifically justifiable, which is essentially what this argument really does. Is it says that atheism is not scientifically justifiable, and to believe that it is wrong. It's incorrect. If it wasn't, you could rationally support the proposition of atheism using logical argumentation backed up by scientific evidence, which they don't do, because it's not possible to do that today. In fact, science seems to support theism very strongly and deny atheism. So what this essentially does then is say that science, if we want to say that what science says is true, then atheism is false. Okay, so what science says is false. I wouldn't say that because science sort of changes and new things come in, and we get like new insights into various ideas, and although often it's a refining principle at work, it's not necessarily always refining. It can be refining from the technical specific facts of the matter, but from a more generic popular idea of what the science is saying, it often seems to turn the science on its head and reverse what it's saying. So if you want to subscribe to scientism, which is this view that if science says it's true, it's true, if science says it's false, then atheism's false and God exists. And this argument shows why. You see, if it was if the scientific position left us with agnosticism, then there'd at least be some semblance of argumentation that you could have for atheism. But so it would be at least sort of semi-justifiable that there is this hypothetical rational atheist. They could say, well, science shows this implies that this could actually be the case, therefore they've got some kind of justification, but there is none. So it's not actually possible. So how strong the scientific evidence is, that will be another question. All we know at the moment is that it's definitely swaying away from the atheism conjecture. Okay. Sorry about rambling. Here we go. Here's another argument which is a little bit more interesting. So, okay, so this sort of redefines atheism. Let me just... Oh, yeah. So this redefines atheism to say that the only really believable form of atheism. I mean, it seems to be that any other type of atheism that isn't this kind of methodological naturalism seems to imply God exists anyway. So I think that the only plausible form of atheism is this naturalistic point of view, which basically says that, which is essentially summed up for the purposes of atheism, at least in these two propositions. So proposition B encapsulates naturalism, this kind of atheistic naturalism, let's call it. Because this argument actually assumes naturalism and shows that God would be more likely to exist than not, or at least it denies the rationality of atheism. If normal naturalism is true, atheistic naturalism has a conjunction of these two basic propositions then. And the first one, well, B, call it, is that all observable effects in our reality are explained by either other naturalistically explicable causes in our reality, or taken as necessarily existing aspects in and of our reality. So basically what this says is for any cause in our reality, there's going to be some kind of material or energetic, some kind of naturalistic cause that we're going to be able to find and measure somehow, in principle at least, in our reality. And we can keep following this chain in circles all over the place, and there, obviously there's going to be certain things in reality which we're just gonna have to take as a given. But that's fine. That's nothing. Maybe quarks, the world of quarks is we can take that as a given, and they're sort of these fundamental sort of sources of cause in some way or another. It's fine, and that's all consistent with a naturalistic paradigm. So this is the first proposition, then, that everything has traceable causes, and we can trace them right back to some primal cause in reality, and that's the essential philosophical sort of naturalistic point of view. From an atheistic point of view. The other proposition that an atheist necessarily believes, this is the key one. I mean, so B basically says that there's no, so if we find some cause where there's no magic in reality, okay, it's either we found some primal cause and we just got to take that as a brute fact, and there was nothing behind it. There was no fairy or God, supernatural entity that caused it. It's just a brute fact of reality. Or we're going to find causes, some chain of causes. Necessarily, some chain of causes got to terminate somewhere. It'll be in reality, and there's nothing behind it. There's no magical entities inserting causes, new causes, into our reality. This is atheism from this naturalistic paradigm. Okay, the other proposition that they need to believe in to be an atheist is that there is no transcendental reality with respect to our reality that contains a person with total power to do anything logically possible in our reality. A transcendental reality containing a person with total power to do anything logically possible in our reality does not exist. That's what the atheists believe. This is a conception that there is no God. There is no one that is sort of, above and beyond our reality, that can just do anything in our reality, willy-nilly. That person doesn't exist. God does not exist, according to the atheist. So B is that there's no gods or fairies or magic, and A is the belief that there is no transcendental creator God or all-powerful God. So taken together, this is what I'm defining atheism is for the purpose of this argument. As I said, basically A is a statement that God does not exist, and B is a statement that gods, little g gods, and magic do not exist. So the preliminary argument is that if B is true, then our reality is simulatable as a simulated reality R. Now, this follows from the universality of computing. If everything, pardon me, if everything in our reality is just a chain of cause and events, then we can model that on a computer. You know, this is it would be mappable to a logical system, and as our reality then would be completely simulatable in a computer, in some kind of computer, as a simulated reality, which we will call R from now on. Now, if R is a simulation, then in R, A is false. Obviously, as follows, doesn't it? So if I can create if I've simulated a reality in some embedded system, then from the respect of this simulation, there is actually a transcendental reality, and there is something in that transcendental reality that is simulated. Since R is being simulated from a transcendent reality by simulators with total power to do anything logically possible in R. This follows from again the universality of computing, and it's basic computing theory. We can stop time in a simulation. We can run things backward if they are just these causes. That'll be, we could pause things. We could see everything going on and think about it for a few weeks and insert new change of events. We could anything logically possible that we can do it from a transcendent realm in the simulated reality. So if R is a simulation of our reality, then atheists in R, because it's a simulation, there'll be theists and atheists in the simulation, just like there are in our normal reality. They're going to have exactly the same background information as atheists do in our reality, but they're wrong. God exists. There's A is false. There's a transcendental reality containing a person with total power to do anything logically possible in their reality. So this is just a formal arrangement. The argument, our reality is simulatable. In our A is false. Atheists in R have got the same information as atheists have in our reality, and they're wrong because A is false. Okay. Now the main argument then is this: if the logical consequence, so this follows, as you see, this first argument follows from this presupposition of naturalism. Okay, this means if this kind of atheistic naturalism is true, then our reality is simulatable, and so are human minds. There'd be nothing magical about minds. They would just be matter undergoing causal physical changes. It's they're simulatable. AI is possible. Just we can download brains. What that would actually mean is anyone's guess. But if this atheistic presupposition is true, then it follows that our reality might be a simulation, and atheism would then be false. So the main argument is essentially that if the logical consequence of some beliefs being true are that they can be held with the same background information and are false, then beliefs are self-defeating beliefs. If you believe something and it follows because of that belief, if you hold that true, the logical implications of them beliefs with other beliefs that you hold mean that the beliefs would be false, means that it's possible that the beliefs would be false, and there'd be no distinguishing features between whether they're false or whether they're true, then you cannot rationally hold them beliefs. They're self-referentially irrational. You'd have no justification, that you'd have no way to distinguish if your reality was one in which God existed, A is true, or A is false, because you're in a simulation that's been simulated by transcendental beings with the power to do anything logically possible. So, so basically, yeah, you shouldn't hold something irrationally. Again, that's no one wants to be irrational. So if a belief is irrational, don't hold it. You shouldn't believe that atheism is true. It's an irrational belief. It's a self-defeating belief system. Since if it's true, then realities where God exists are constructible. See, God becomes a possibility if atheism is true. We don't know if it's actually possible that God's a constructible possibility. If methodological naturalism is false, there might be aspects of our reality which are not simulatable, and there may be no way to create any kind of embedded reality with these mechanisms that are required for our reality. We wouldn't know if we could make an embedded reality with them mechanisms operating in the same way that is necessary to be equivalent to our reality, so that we could be with respect to that reality like God is with respect to our reality. So it's impossible to be a rational atheist. Essentially, it basically demonstrates this argument that the rational belief is completely theistic. You cannot have a rational atheistic belief. If belief in God is between 0 and 1, where 0 is atheism and 1 is theism, then if belief is that, then rational belief is greater than 0.5 up to 1. There's no possibility of rationality between agnosticism and atheism. That whole realm is being cut away from the realm of rationality with this argument. If this argument is true. So there you have it. There's a defeater for the rationality of atheism. Now, there's no defeater, as far as I know, for theism. Okay, now this means that we're not stuck purely with agnosticism. We'd need a defeater, a defeater which says that if theism is true, then there's no possible way in which we could distinguish it being true or false, like we've shown with atheism here. So yeah, that leaves us with theism. If we want to be rational, we can have blind faith, blind belief. We can just sort of shrug our shoulders and say we don't care. We can believe anything in that way, irrationally, blindly. But if we want to rationally believe things, then atheism's out the window, I'm afraid. It's not an option. So yeah, that's an interesting argument. Is there anything to say? So somebody brought up there was a lot of misunderstanding and general atheist trolling, but somebody did bring up a potential query with this. I don't think it works in any reasonable way, but essentially, if God, if A is true, if God exists and he's got the power to do anything logically possible in our reality, and he does something in our reality that we could trace, then we could no longer simulate a reality with B being true. But it doesn't really matter, does it? Because we could simulate a reality with that same, logical change, that goes against B. So the argument just says that God is if you want to be in the realm of non-proof of theism, then God would never be able to act with anything visible, I suppose, on his logical all power. But so maybe God will never act. We don't need to ever act. We can run a simulation and not sort of change it as it's running. We just let it run. We've got the power to change it, but we don't. doesn't mean that we don't exist and we don't have that power. It just means that we just want to see how it runs. So yeah, it's not a valid detraction from the argument. Let's see. That's basically the size of it. I think there's no other issues I wanted to bring up, and this video is essentially a test. I don't even know if this works. I'm getting a flashing on the screen. I don't know if that's going to come through on the video, so I'll stop this now and see how it turned out. It's probably and see if it's worth putting up. And I hope if anyone does manage to get through my meandering, monotone, sleepy voice and find this interesting, brilliant.